Since 1816, the camera has been a substantial part of history. With its ability to capture what the human eye sees, people have been using it to capture a range of events, from monumental moments in history to whatever this is. This is as far as most people's knowledge extends to. You point a camera at something and you press a button, and it takes a picture. But there's much more to it than that, and I'm going to talk about the entire process step by step. It all starts with finding something to capture. For example, let's just go with my curtains here. When we simply point a camera at the object and look through the viewfinder or the television screen here, we can see that the image is shown on the screen. This is done through the power of light. The light reflecting off the lenses gives them colour, bounces into the camera's lens and then onto the sensor within the camera. So if I take the lens off this camera here, we can see inside it has a mirror, and it's also got, if I flip this screen up here, a sensor within the mirror. Back in the old days of physical film cameras, this is where the film would be. With a film camera, the light would hit the negative and a chemical reaction would start, thus burning the picture into the film. With a modern day camera, such as this Canon 100D, you can see that there's a sensor and a mirror. The sensor within the camera captures the image using RGB coloured pixels that measure how much of a particular colour there is, and then translates that into binary code with the use of the CPU on board the camera. Once the image has been turned into zeros and ones, it's taken from the sensor into the SD card within the camera. An SD card is a small card used to store large amounts of digital data, most commonly being used within DSLRs, such as this one. Once the data has been stored onto the SD card, it stays on there until it's plugged into another device or the SD card is physically destroyed. Let's take a picture and follow its journey, shall we? So if we plug this into my computer, or say in just any other device, we can see what's being stored on there. So on this card we can see some theme park pictures from my previous trips out, and it says here the file format is a CR3. A CR3 is a type of file format which all Canon branded cameras use. It's Canon's own file type that stores raw data that a camera requires. When I mentioned earlier that the sensor translated light data into binary code, these details here is the PC reading that binary code and translating it into something that we can read. Now I have the file here, there's lots of things I can do with it. I can send it to an editing software so I can make it look more eye-catching and visually pleasing. I could format the file into a different type so it's easier for other people to access, such as changing it from a CR3 to a JPEG file so other computer programs can read it. I'm going to send this picture through an editing software to make it look more interesting. Now this software, known as Lightroom, is able to read the data that the camera has provided and is able to adjust its own settings to best accommodate the picture's requirements. Once I've done a little fancy work to this picture, I'm able to export it. This is changing the binary code slightly so that a different range of colours shows when I open the picture. With this image, I can do many things. I could send it to friends, I could print it out, or I can send it to more friends, or I could just simply stare at it. Again, a multitude of things I could do. What I am going to do though is send this picture to be shown on my TV screen, because who doesn't want a picture of this on their TV at all times? I certainly do. So here's my finalised image, all nicely rendered in full quality and sitting here on my computer. To get it onto my television, I can do one of two things. I could plug in another type of storage device, like a USB stick. The picture can be moved freely onto this stick, in turn moving all the zeros and ones onto this little storage device. And with this, I can now move this picture onto any other device that has a USB port on it, such as my television, and voila, it's right there for the entire household to see. Or I could use the internet.
I'm gonna do an internet!
What I do is I open up my favourite image website and simply upload the image into there. By doing this, I'm sending a certain amount of ones and zeros up into the cloud, and allowing it to sit in whatever online storage I have until I require it. The good thing about online storage is that it can be accessed anytime, anywhere, provided you have an internet connection. All these ones and zeros that make up my image is somewhere within the internet, neatly tidied away and tucked under a folder that says my name on it. With my image now being shown on the TV, that concludes its journey. It's gone from being something that I've seen and taken a picture of to something I can hold forever. There are, of course, other aspects of taking a picture, such as the camera's battery if it's a digital single reflex camera, or DSLR for short. Those cameras need an electric supply for it to work in the first place, and that has to come from a battery, which I guess comes from a charger, but that then comes from a wall socket, which I guess also comes from an electricity supply within the house, and I guess that eventually leads back to the national grid. But you may be asking, what is the national grid? Well, we get our electricity from the sun, water, wind, and traditional fuels. It's turned into energy by producers. Then the national grid steps in, taking high voltage raw electricity from the producers and carrying it around the country on the one world's most reliable networks of cables, pylons, and wires. The amount of energy we use goes up and down. Behind the scenes, the electricity system's operators' control rooms work to balance supply and demand, making sure there's always enough for everyone. So, how does it get into our homes? A network of local operators manage and sustain the pylons, substations, and cables in your region to make sure they keep your lights on. To make the electricity safe for us to use, they help to lower the voltage first, before feeding it down their cables into our front doors. Electric signals are crucial in any form of media. It helps with the process of making a film or taking a picture, and it couldn't be done without it. Say, film cameras, for example. Even though the mechanisms within the camera are spring-loaded, once the film has been shot on, the light has affected the roll and it needs to be developed. This is done through the use of a dark red room and chemicals. The red lights are powered by electric cables within the walls. Even though the entire filming process is using an old-style camera and may be fully mechanical, there is always some form of electricity used along the process. As time went on, cameras started to get better, now using small batteries as their power supply. These batteries, in turn, power the CPU within the camera, getting the systems working. With DSLR cameras, the battery provides power to the electronic display, as well as operations such as opening and closing the mechanical shutter, metering exposure, and driving the autofocus motor or stabilizing systems in lenses such as these. This differs slightly when it comes to mirrorless cameras. Much more of the power is used by the electronic viewfinder, meaning that battery capacities tend to be lower for mirrorless. They also may be smaller for mirrorless cameras to conserve on body size and make the camera more portable. I've spoken about the different steps it takes to render a picture, as well as talking about how electricity affects a camera's usability. Hopefully by now, if you're not sick of my voice, you'll understand a little bit more about the journey of a picture/video and how much effort it goes into putting it up onto the big screen, like a cinema. You should now also be able to talk about what steps it takes to develop a picture too, either old style film cameras or digital ones.